Well, hello, Igniting Hope family. I am Emily Newstater, just hopping on here. I'm going to give you guys a few minutes as you hop on as well. When you've hopped on, if you get a second in the chat, tell me where you're from. I'll do my best to interact with the chat as I get a chance to share today. Beautiful sunshiny day in Northern California. We've got a bunch of rain coming, which we don't mind either. Fill up our lakes and our ponds. But I know you might be joining us from the other side of the world. But if you get a chance, hop in the chat and tell me where you're joining us from today. Oh, I see one of my favorite people, the amazing anointed Angela Parker is on. This message makes me think of her. She's a detail woman. Yeah, so welcome. Monday, November 18th. What a glorious day to be alive and to be a part of God's story today. Oh, yeah, well, I'm going to hop in. I love it when God is just so fresh and so real. Even when I'm reading, good morning, Paul. Even when I am reading his word, which is a very old book. Actually, in the last 2 years, I fell in love with reading God's word again. I had a really dry spell where I was believing a lie. And once God broke through that lie, man, I've had such a passion for his word. But I will tell you that there's some times that I read the Bible, certain parts, so you might have the same thought, and I think, God, why did you put that part in there? You got these 66 books, of all the things you could have said. And I imagine going back to like when the Bible was actually written. So Moses probably wasn't the one who wrote it down. He probably had a scribe or lots of scribes who were over there taking notes, writing down all the details because they knew that the details were an important part of the story that needed to be passed on. So the scribes were given a very serious job to record the story of God, because then every believer in this story was given the challenge, the invitation to share this story. Hi, Deb. All right, I think we're back. So anyway, we were given this beautiful invitation to continue to share God's story. One of my favorite places in the Old Testament is where it gives us the challenge as parents to share God's story with our children as we're walking down the road, as we're living life. But somebody had to write down all of those details. So can you imagine being the scribe who's sitting there writing, and it was not necessarily an easy process, either stone or parchment, all that. But can you imagine the scribe who's sitting down there writing when Moses starts describing the dimensions of the tabernacle? Oh, it's not just a sentence or two. It's numbers and details and numbers and details. Or the ark. The ark was a huge project, but God took time to have those details written down so that we, thousands of years later, could read the details of the dimension of the ark. Well, I personally have read through some of those details, like the number of pomegranates that got engraved or embroidered into the tabernacle. And I've thought to myself, God, why did you put those things in there? That seems like a little bit of a wasted space. Like, couldn't you have told us something, more revelatory, more life-changing than these details? And I had this this revelation from the Lord that these details that God made sure that we had a record of, these details help paint a picture for something that we've never seen before. They had never seen an ark before. They didn't even know what rain was. So the one way that God could paint the picture for them about how big and important this project was by giving them the details and the dimensions. And so then Noah and his family knew there was going to be work that had to go into this, but they also had some vision. So details help give us vision. So the tabernacle, you think all of that vision that came out in the details, they'd never built a tabernacle like that before. They needed a place that would house the most holy God. Never before had that been created. So God took time to describe to us the detail so that we could see the picture of something before it was actually built. Now, I can imagine Noah and his sons, they had to cut a whole lot of trees. And there was probably some days that they were tired of cutting trees, but they had been given a vision of the big project that God was working on. That helps you, that gives you some connection and some purpose to your everyday life. They didn't just have to cut down a tree. They then had to plane the trees. They had to prep the trees to become boards. And then they had it worked out that there was a very specific place in the ark's design where that board needed to go, and it needed to fit just right, but it wasn't just one board. It was connected to all of these other boards. And when you connect all of these details together, you get something amazing like the ark. Or when you connect all these details together, you get something amazing like the tabernacle. Or when David started collecting supplies for Solomon to build the temple, all of these details were written out. And I've looked at these passages in the Bible now, and now I can see, oh, God's heart was not just to give me a whole bunch of numbers. His heart was to show me that these details will build the vision, they'll build the project, and they'll give purpose to the everyday. So details help give vision to God's biggest project. Well, what is God's biggest project? If you jump with me to Luke, you can start in, let's see, it's Luke 3. So I won't read all of it to you. But Luke 3, we start to hear the genealogy of Jesus. Couple places in the Old Testament, we hear a lot of genealogy, who was whose son, father, and all that. But you get to the very end of this genealogy, and the very last line was, Adam was the son of God. God's biggest project is us. It is the story, his story of his love for us. And when we read things like the genealogy of Jesus, we get to see that God was not just thinking Adam and then how do I jump all the way to Jesus? God was thinking about every detail, every person that would be a part of that story. So when you read through, we know some of these names. You know, Noah is listed in Levi, Simeon, Judah, Joseph, but then there's a whole lot of other names that this might be the only time they're mentioned in the Bible. But God is saying they are a detail in my story. And when God has you as a detail, it's because he knows the exact place. Just like the board in the ark, when he designed this big story, he has a place in the story for Nahum. He had a place in the story for Esli. And so he's telling us the genealogy of Jesus from Adam to Jesus so that we get the idea that people are the biggest part of God's project. His project is us, and every person is a detail in that project. So God always brings things personally to me. So I'm imagining when God created all these amazing people, there's not anybody else that's exactly like me. which means there's a lot of people who are very different from me. But if God gives details in order to help paint the picture or give us a vision for his big project, then I get to look at my brothers and sisters and I get to look at them and see the part of the vision that doesn't match my part. I can look at Debbie or Dana or Angela and Paul. I can look at you guys and say, oh, wow, I get a better picture of God's big project story by looking at you all because you look different than me, but you have an important place in this project. As a leader, I can look at anyone and say, oh, you know, we're just getting them ready to fit into that place that God has designed for them in this project. Leading people's not always easy. Leading myself is not always easy, but I can say, I am a part of this project and God is graciously, he's cutting down the tree, he's planing it, he's getting it ready for that perfect spot that he has for me. And then my invitation as a leader is I get to look at you, and even on your worst day or my worst day, I get this idea that you are a part of God's story. You have something so important that God's willing to list out names and genealogy. He knows exactly where you fit in that story. So I get to help get you ready to fit into that perfect place. So he's doing that with me, and he's graced me with leaders who are helping get me ready to be in that perfect place. But I also get to do that to my brothers and sisters. Even my brothers and sisters who are pre-believers, I get to already speak into their life. I get to recognize that they are a divine detail in God's story, and I get to help get them from where they are now, the roughest, rawest version, and I get to help get them ready to be placed into that unique position in God's story, because this is a legacy story. We are going to do our part, and then we're passing this story on to the next generation. So that gives me this beautiful invitation to make sure that I'm connected to God's heart for me, that I'm leading myself well, that I'm allowing him to lead me and love me, that I'm growing into this identity that he already has planned out. He already has the blueprints, the plans, and I want to be that place in the project. I want to make sure that if I'm next, maybe I'm the board that's next to Debbie. I want to make sure I'm doing my part so that she can do her part. So it's this details give us vision, details give us connection, because no detail stands alone. Not in the ark. You can't have an ark with one board. You can't have an ark if you're missing a board. In God's story, it's the same way. Each of us is a divine detail, and he is crafting us, and he's allowed us to help craft the people in our lives, help craft us to be the perfect piece for that story. So as I finish off, I'm looking at you guys and I'm just blessing you with the grace to be a divine detail, to know that you are an important part of the story, that he's planned for you to be a part of the story from the very beginning because you're his. Just like it says that Adam was a son of God, and then it goes all the way down through the genealogy. You are that son, you are that daughter that he's divinely picked for your position, for your purpose in this story. And I just speak that today is going to be an easy day for you to lead yourself, for you to build yourself, and for you to lead and build others, as they are also a divine detail in this story. So thank you for joining me today. Man, I just love that God doesn't do anything accidental. He invites us into every detail of his story. And today I think you're going to feel, right now you are feeling the pleasure and the invitation of the Lord to settle into the divinity of who you are, your part in this project that He has for you. So we just bless you. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.